Welcome back to the Amber Show, and today joining us we have Janelle Kellman, and Janelle is running for Lieutenant Governor for the state of California. Janelle, how are you this morning?
Well, Amber, I am doing great. Almost afternoon on a long weekend, so we're just talking about lots of downtime, lots of reading. I love to read. I love to run. So it's been a good weekend. How about you?
It's been a really, really great weekend over here as well, too. Just very, very relaxing. Just hanging out with my son out here. It's a beautiful, beautiful day in Southern California. Before we get into the nitty-gritty of this interview and everything, why don't you just tell us a little bit about yourself for people that might not know you that well?
Sure. Well, I'll start with what you already mentioned. I'm Janelle Kellman, and I'm running for Lieutenant Governor of California. Lieutenant governor is an interesting role. It's been largely dismissed, I think, as ceremonial by a lot of people. We've also seen a lot of folks using it as a stepping stone to something else. And I want to do the job. And I think the job is actually a roadmap, a blueprint, if you will, for the success of California, because it's all about public higher education, climate and ocean health, and economic development. And I think that those three things together are exactly what we need to figure out how to stay resilient in the face of Trump administration, who doesn't want to help California, in the face of climate risk that we're seeing every day, and then in the face of the high cost of living we have here in California. So my background is I'm an environmental and land use attorney, a small business owner. I started an e-commerce company about 17 years ago, and a former mayor. I really, really love details. I'm a little bit of a policy wonk in a runner's body, if you will. And I spent 10 years on the planning commission here in the city of Sausalito, 4 years on city council. I served as the mayor, and I really love local and regional planning. But about 7 years ago, I started a nonprofit focused on climate risk around flooding and infrastructure. And I began to work closely with the United Nations, the US Embassy in Paris. And so while I have this local government experience, I also have global climate policy experience. And
That's
I think that
amazing.
makes me uniquely well suited to take on the job of Lieutenant Governor.
That's amazing. Now, what, like, traditionally, are the roles on a day-to-day basis of the lieutenant governor? I think you're right. I think a lot of people either see it as ceremonial or almost as like the vice governor. You'll step in if something happens to the governor, but outside of that, you obviously have a day job as lieutenant governor. What does that look like on a day-to-day basis?
That's right. Well, and I saw today somewhere that I didn't even know this, that the salary of lieutenant governor is $188,000. Those are taxpayer
Okay.
dollars. So
Yeah.
whoever takes this job needs to take it very, very seriously. And so the basic role at very high level is you preside over the state senate, you serve as the governor if the governor is unavailable. But the policy and substantive aspects of the role are the ones that really attracted me to this job specifically. Like, I like this job description. And so I would be the only statewide office on the governing body of all three levels of public higher education. I would serve as a UC regent. I would serve on the board of trustees at the CSU, the board of governors of the community college system. Community colleges are the economic lifeblood of California. One out of every
Amen.
16 jobs comes out of the community colleges, so huge opportunity for socioeconomic success. And it's a climate and ocean role. So I would serve on the Ocean Protection Council. That's 7 people looking at all the science behind our ocean policy. I would serve on the California Coastal Commission, protecting our coastlines, our bulkheads, our tidelands. And I do this because I'm in Sausalito and the water's here, and these are state lands right here, so I keep doing that. And I would serve on the 3-person State Lands Commission, overseeing almost 5 million acres of public lands, public access, the opportunity maybe to build housing or clean energy. And then the last piece is I would be the chair of the California Commission on Economic Development. So the summary is public higher education, climate, ocean health, and economic development. And that is an opportunity to connect the dots to do something really special here in California.
I think so as well too. And before we dive into each one of those specifically, you're running up against a field of candidates for this in the coming primary that's on June 2nd. Tell me a little bit, you talked a little bit about your background, but what specifically distinguishes you from those other candidates? Like, when people are making a choice on the ballot, why specifically choose you, Janelle Kellman?
Yeah, well, so the TLDR is my experience matches the job, right? And I've gone over the job and I've gone over my experience, and that's first and foremost why I'm running for this position. But the second difference is I'm not coming to this race from the Sacramento pipeline. I'm coming from local government, from land use, from climate risk, from small business, actually getting things done. And I've had to deal with everything from housing to permitting to infrastructure to wildfire and flood risk, not as talking points, but as real problems that are impacting real people. And I see this as an election around massive change and opportunity. And I'm the only top Democrat who's not part of the Newsom administration as either an elected or an appointee. So I really
Wow.
do
Okay.
bring an outsider's perspective, but a resume of 30 years of experience to do the position.
Now that's really interesting. Like the rest of these folks are kind of from that whole entire Newsom ecosystem. You've been running largely a grassroots, campaign from the very beginning. What challenges have you run up against? As you know, I'm running also here locally, but it's much easier to run a local grassroots campaign, right? It's smaller dollar amounts, smaller donors, a smaller land mass that you have to cover. I mean, you're talking about a statewide race from a grassroots perspective. Like how has that been for you?
Yeah, I'll address that, but then I'm also going to tell you what I think has worked for us. So the,
Okay.
the challenges are, of course, name recognition. And when we did our very first poll, I was tied for second with our state treasurer. And it turns out that not very many people know her or her name, or even what the treasurer does. So it's a down ballot race, and most of the candidates in my race are not well known. So we're all sort of equal in that footing. But then the challenge is raising money from the establishment or the donor class or the entrenched special interests. Everybody, from labor to different organizations that are used to doing business with Sacramento. And for those of us who are not inside Sacramento, it can be harder to break through. Now, the flip side of that is the voter, the electorate has become savvy. And with social media, people know where to find information. And they want to see
Right.
authenticity. And they want to see integrity. They don't want to see people with scandals. We have somebody in my race who has a sexual harassment lawsuit that she settled,
Yeah.
accusations around relationships with China. Like the voters are done with that. And so what we have done is not just grassroots, but it's authentic. It's real. And people, when they experience me either in person or on social media, I'm consistent. And so I
Yeah.
think people have really gotten a sense of who I am. You're not going to meet me in person and then see me online and then get in a conversation with me and think I'm three different people. You're going to feel
No.
like, oh, I know her now. We're friends.
Yeah. Yeah. And I've had that experience personally because I had the opportunity to attend the endorsement meeting for the Stonewall Democrats, and we'll get into that in just a little bit. But actually the very first time, and I don't think I've even shared this story with you, the very first time that I ever had my first Janelle Kellman experience was I was on Instagram and I was doing my scrolling and everything, and I got to see a really great ad that you had done regarding the fire issues here in Southern California. So let's touch on that piece of your campaign first, is the fire issues. So tell us a little bit more about land use and like your experience in that and what you're hoping to accomplish in that role with everything that we do face here in California.
Well, I got to say, Amber, I am shocked that I'm the only person in my race and even in the governor's race who talks about the wildfires. It's shocking to me because for me, wildfires are the hidden cost driver in California. They are
Huge.
definitely driving up our costs of living, our taxes, our mortgage, our rents, even if your home is never going to burn. And so,
Right.
preventing fires is going to cost far less than rebuilding after them. And we need to invest in prevention so we don't have to pay for cleanup. And so I like to talk to people about how their lives have changed, how they've been impacted, whether their insurance rates have gone up, mine has doubled, and what we can do and what leaders should be focused on. And I think very clearly there are three things. First is we can reduce fire risk before it becomes a disaster cost.
Right.
And we do that by investing in proven prevention like fuel reduction, forest management, prescribed burns, and even local fire breaks to stop some of these small risks from becoming devastating fires. The second is very community focused. We have to protect families where they live and make sure that no matter your socioeconomic status, you have the resources to harden your home, create defensible space, and strengthen neighborhood resilience against wildfire. And then the last piece of this that I actually love talking about is how do we keep insurers in the market and reward
Yeah.
prevention? So I think we need to set clear rules that tie wildfire mitigation to lower premiums. If we're going to invest and mitigate the risk, we should get
Hmm.
rewarded for that. And we should
Yes.
also
Yeah.
invite the insurance companies to be part of the solution by having them also pay for wildfire prevention. And these are themes that I've taken around the state, no matter if I'm in a blue, a red, or a purple county.
I'd imagine.
If I talk about wildfires, people say, oh, wait a second, this I actually care about. So I was up in Mariposa outside of Yosemite for Labor Day last year.
Yeah.
And there I was, a very small group of Democrats, because it's a red county. And we were going down Main Street, and I had to get on and off the float and go talk to people. And people really were not interested in talking to a Democrat until I said, listen, I just want to talk to you about wildfires. This is what I want to prevent and how I want to help your families. And they said, oh, well, that we want to talk about. That makes sense.
Right? Because I mean, these are those things when we're talking about them that like cross partisan lines. It doesn't matter if you're a red house or a blue house, that fire is going to be indiscriminate across the board. And I know that you're speaking to a lot of my audience right now. I mean, like, we had one of the most devastating fires here in local history, the Thomas Fire, that ripped all the way through one side of Ventura County, all the way through the other. Tons of homes were lost. It didn't matter if you were rich, if you were poor, if you were red, if you were blue. I mean, and then obviously we saw insurers either double their rates in the area or just stop insuring altogether or create humongous, hardships for the actual homeowners, and push the cost on the homeowners to do that fire abatement in their area if they wanted to be covered. So this is obviously, this is definitely something that's extremely important to the electorate. So it's no surprise that that's the reaction that you're getting, regardless of where you're going with that.
I mean, Simi Valley last week, a week and a half ago?
Yeah.
I'm sure.
Yeah. Into Camarillo and Ojai. Absolutely. Yeah.
And I'll just add, on the Thomas Fire, after the Thomas Fire, because there was so much vegetation removal from the fire, then you guys had huge landslides and mudslides, right? And so again, the ability to understand, like, how do we prevent this? And then if we're in a situation where we may have these future risks, what do we do around insurance? What do we do around land use planning, around permitting? This is the work I've done my entire career. And so you begin to see how, oh, wait a second, my local land use planning work really makes a difference because I know how communities operate and I know how to get it done.
So what you're saying is it would almost be great to have an expert in the role where you might need an expert in the role. One of the things that you brought...
Experience matches the job. Shocking,
exactly. Right? One of the things that you brought up that we share is you're up there in Sausalito. You've got this beautiful coastline up there. We have the same type of environment down here. Ventura is one of the very few cities that can have a walkable city hall right down to our pier, and from the mayor's desk, we are looking directly at our coastline, and we are affected by things like oil pipelines, all of these things. We've had some bad oil spills in the area, oil seepage constantly. Tell me a little bit more about your plans to protect our coastline, to protect our environment.
Well, so I don't think I shared this with you yet. When I first decided to run for office, I really wanted to get into as many counties and as many communities as possible. So as a trail runner, every time I saw the phrase campaign trail, I always thought, well, where are the trails? So I designed these 5 4-day trips. They're originally going to be backpacking, but wanted to meet more voters, so we moved ourselves more urban. The first trip was up to the Klamath River watershed up in Humboldt County. We went from Wairika to Eureka. But the second trip was from Ventura to Monterey. And the first day in Ventura, we met with the Ventura Chamber of Commerce, but the next day we went out to the Matilaha Dam. And we met with Ojai Land Conservancy, and we met with Surfrider. And the Matilaha Dam is so interesting because it's sitting there on the Ventura River, and it's not in use, but what it's doing is it's trapping steelhead and other endangered species, and it's preventing sedimentation from going upriver down to the coast. And so Ventura's had massive beach renourishment issues because you're not getting the natural resedimentation. And so my background allows me to understand that perspective and that hardship, and to make that connection between something that's happening upriver. And by the way, Ventura County has the money to remove it. There's just a handful of private property owners who are concerned about flood risk. And if it were to be removed, we would see natural beach renourishment. And so I want to explore some of those local watershed issues. As we went north, we went over to the Gaviota coastline with another member of Surfrider, and we went in Santa Barbara to that area where Sable has their oil and gas operations.
It's a huge deal right now.
That's a huge deal right now. And so,
Yeah.
as I mentioned earlier, I would serve on the State Lands Commission and on the Coastal Commission. The two of those commissions together would be the last line of defense against offshore oil and gas drilling.
Yeah.
It would be a huge opportunity for the person in those roles to make sure that we keep Trump and the administration from drilling off of our coastline. And so I want to make sure that we protect our coastlines, we invest in beach renourishment, we take proactive measures around sea level rise and flooding from storm surge and increased intensity. And then we think proactively and in an innovative fashion around renewable energy and ways to mitigate greenhouse gas emissions while we also seek to sequester carbon.
Now, you bring up an interesting point here, right? With the dam out in Ojai, is that you have those handful of private residents that are concerned about flood risk. How do you balance that out, right? Where you can like still take care of the beach renourishment, making sure that that sediment from upstream gets downstream, but also on the same time, like taking care of those local residents that have those concerns as well. Like, what would you be saying to those local residents as you tried to move forward with a plan like this?
Yeah, I would absolutely partner with them on science-based investigations on flood risk. So rather than having a concern that there's no water now, then there could be water and therefore will flood, let's prove that out, right? We can model that. We have GIS mapping systems. We understand flow rates. We know where water will go. We can model that out with a high degree of certainty. So let's ground our decisions in science.
Yep. Now, you also brought up the Sable oil pipeline, the Trump administration and their drill baby drill bullshit, right? And in your role, it almost seems like, like a David and Goliath type of scenario. You've got the federal government and, all their forces essentially, being pushed into this and their special interests. How do you push back against the Trump administration? How do you protect our coastlines from that type of invasion?
Well, there's two separate things that need to happen. The first is, and our Attorney General is already doing this, continue to sue the federal government to protect the interests of the people of California. I think we've probably submitted over 200 pieces of litigation. So our Attorney General is doing a really great job of this. But the second piece of this is to be a watchdog. And I don't mean a sort of a passive watchdog, but somebody who is looking for those opportunities to push back. And I'll give you an example. I mentioned to somebody recently. Last week, unbeknownst to most people, the Trump administration filed a claim under with the Department of Commerce challenging the Coastal Zone Management Act. Okay. Right? The Coastal Commission sits under the Coastal Zone Management Act. If the CZMA were to be lifted or eradicated, it would abdicate the Coastal Commission from a lot of its responsibility and duties. That's what he's trying to do, trying to undermine us.
Of course,
so we need to be on the lookout for this and then go file a lawsuit to the extent we can, prevent any of the state or local permits that we need to withhold, and make sure that we connect the dots and really exhaust all of our remedies and not give up, really just never give up.
Yeah, absolutely. And we see that playing out like as a successful strategy over and over, right? Sue the Trump administration. And like when the California government sues the Trump administration, I mean, like it is a very lopsided win record right now at this point. And so I feel like we need to continue to run out the clock, as we continue to move forward with this and protect those pipelines, protect those shorelines and protect, the people here from the pipeline. One of the things that I want to kind of shift gears to, because I had the opportunity to like personally meet you during the endorsement, procedure at the Stonewall Democrats, is your role in the LGBTQ plus community. Obviously, this is really important to me as a proud T in that LGBTQ and as a proud L yourself. We see so many politicians, I want to say, sometimes move to the middle, as they move through, election or as they move through their own tenure in their position to try to appeal to this mass base. And a lot of times, sometimes they will downplay their role in either the LGBTQ community or other left-leaning issues. I've leaned into that myself in my own race of being proud of who I am and what I bring to the table. And I see a lot of that in yourself as well, too. You do not shy away from talking about your role in the LGBTQ community. So tell me a little bit more about that and what that means to you.
Yeah, I really appreciate you bringing it up because it is obviously so very personal. And I have seen that reticence that you're alluding to in real life. I mean, Equality California went ahead and endorsed somebody else in my race. Now, I'm the only openly LGBTQ running statewide in California. And Equality California chose to endorse somebody else. And that's impactful to me because it shows that we're sort of shying away from really getting behind our LGBTQ plus community members. And I think one of the functions of an organization like Equality California or others is to help candidates like us become even more viable, right?
Yes,
And
absolutely.
because visibility matters. And that's why I was so really proud to receive the endorsement of the Stonewall Democratic Club. Quick shout out to Renee Grace Rodriguez, Sean, Ayed, other members of the endorsement committee for really just being visionaries, being brave, being willing to take chances, not just on me, but on other candidates who they want to see as the future leadership of our community and the future leadership of California. And so, Brene Brown, maybe I can't help it, Brene Brown, she just came out with a new book, so she's literally on every podcast I listen to, and as a runner, I listen to a lot of podcasts. She had this beautiful phrase that stuck with me. She said that courage is vulnerability in the face of uncertainty. And so, real leadership takes courage. And it means that sometimes you do not know what the outcome will be. But if you make yourself vulnerable in the face of that uncertainty, that is the absolute definition of courage. And by the way, she went and interviewed NFL teams, Navy SEAL teams, and she said, can you have courage without being vulnerable? And all of them said, absolutely not, you cannot.
Interesting. I really, really like that. One of the phrases that I also like, one of the phrases that I also like as well too is, if you can see it, you can be it. And there's so few senior leaders that are in the LGBTQ community. What does it mean to you to be looked up, by, somebody from the younger generation, one of our LGBTQ youth, and for them to see a proud lesbian in a statewide office like this?
Those are sort of some of my favorite constituents. I mean, to be given the privilege of standing up in front of a group of people and having some of those people be young people who are looking for mentors, looking for leadership. I mean, what an honor to be in that position. And I'll just give a quick shout out to Tony Atkins, who was running for governor for a while and dropped out. But, Tony was like that for so many of us, including myself. And so I do really think that visibility matters, mentoring matters, showing up and supporting and being courageous. It is always the right thing to do. Always, right? We need to make sure we're proceeding with integrity and authenticity.
Yes, absolutely. And oh gosh, integrity matters so much these days. And we see that in every level of government, whether it's local government here, we're dealing with an integrity matter right now at the Ventura County Office of Education, whether you're talking about your competitor with the sexual harassment, obviously our federal government, Speaking of education, we're going to jump into that real quick as kind of our last topic here, because that was one of the I guess linchpins of your campaign here, is this education piece. And then I guess like hand in hand with that is also like the housing piece, because so many like local school boards, including the Ventura Unified School District, is facing this situation now where you're going to be closing schools due to a lack of enrollment, the declining birth rate. And we're going to have a lot of these surplus properties. So tell me a little bit about your thoughts on, the role of the lieutenant governor in the educational space, and then as well as like your thoughts on things like housing as well too, and how you can make a big play in that area.
So yeah, as lieutenant governor, I would serve on the UC Board of Regents and the CSU Board of Trustees, and I would use those seats actively. And my agenda would be focused on access, on affordability, on housing, on transfer, workforce alignment, and accountability. And so, first and foremost, I want to make California's public higher education systems to be the strongest ladders of opportunity. And that means making the community college to UC and community college to CSU transfer pathways as efficient as possible. I was down in Santa Monica Community College a couple of weeks ago, and apparently something like 92% of the students who want to go to UCLA get into UCLA from Santa Monica Community College. So
Wow.
these transfer pathways are real. And they're really important, especially if you can't afford to go to a four-year right off the bat. So that
Yeah,
would
of
be sort of
course.
where I'd start. I also want to push really hard on student housing and workforce housing, because if students can't afford to live near campus, they can't finish degrees. And if faculty and public workers can't live where they work, we lose the workforce that we need. And so housing, I think, has to be treated as core education infrastructure. And then I would also focus on the full cost of attendance, not just tuition. Students are struggling with housing, with food, with transportation, childcare, debt,
Yes.
and I think we need better transparency and strategies to reserve those costs. And so a core pillar, in addition to the work with the UCs and the CSU, a core pillar for me is the opportunity to make community colleges free for all Californians. And
Amazing.
right now, under the Promise Grant, you have free enrollment for about 70%. I want to close that gap. And then I also want to make sure it's not just first-time students, it's night students, it's returning students, and where possible, we also help offset the costs of maybe transportation, maybe books, maybe those higher electives of AP classes, especially in areas where we need workforce like healthcare.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And I think that's amazing. Closing that gap would be incredibly important because that's also where you're going to see a lot of folks, coming out of that gap and into the trade work and into places like healthcare as well. All
That's
right,
right.
last question. This is how we're going to finish this up here. We're thinking down the road, 4 years, you're reelected, 8 years. You've served this massive term here in California. It's the Janelle Kellman era. What
When
what
everybody has
are
pocket squares, is that what happens?
That's
Then we'll
exactly
really
what's
know.
happening. That's exactly what's happening. It's going to be a very classy era.
That's right.
What are the voters looking back on during the Janelle Kellman era and saying, "Wow, look at what she did for California"? Like, what are going to be those wow moments that the voters are going to be so thankful for that they chose you?
Great question. I love this. They're going to see a real impact on everyday costs of living. They will see at least a 25% reduction in electricity costs, maybe even as high as 50%, right? We can do that by changing the way we underground our lines, the way we harden our lines, take them out of the utility profit model, investing in battery and storage and virtual power plants and peak demand pricing, but a reduction in everyday bills like electricity by at least 25%, maybe 50%. The second thing is an investment in year-round wildfire prevention. As I mentioned, the hidden cost driver, these huge, massive mega fires that we're seeing, we won't see those anymore because we've been proactive. And in doing so, we've been able then to execute on some of our housing goals. We've got thousands of units sitting in San Diego and other places that can't be built because they're sitting in a wildland urban interface, which is a high fire hazard zone. And so we're going to see more housing get built because we've resolved the questions around fire risk. And then the last piece of it, we will see more students attend and graduate from community college into good paying jobs. This will address the worker shortfall. It will contribute to rising wages. And if we do it right, we'll be able to address some of the needs of our communities, like healthcare workers, like electricians for EV chargers and solar panel installations. And so we have an opportunity to address cost of living, public safety, and climate risk all at the same time. And as a climate risk expert, that is so meaningful to me, and I think the opportunity is enormous.
Well, I'll tell you what, as just speaking as myself, as just a resident here in Southern California, you're speaking my language. I mean, lower utility costs. I mean, you're talking about more housing to help stabilize things like family growth inside of these cities that have declining enrollment so that we can start seeing, like a more educated residency base here in California. I mean, I personally can't wait to live through the Janelle Kellman era. So thank you so much for making
Like
life better
an
for us here in
era.
California.
I'm stoked for an era. I feel like, maybe T Swift will let me go on an Eras tour. Who knows?
Oh my gosh, could you imagine? Could you imagine? Well, maybe that's what you'll be doing at the end of the 8 years. It'll be the Janelle Kellman Eras Tour. There you go.
That's right.
So, thank you so much for joining me. I really appreciate it. This has been a really wonderful interview. I hope that the audience had the opportunity to get to know a little bit more about you, find you on their ballot here. We've got, polling places are now open. If you've got your ballot, like getting those turned into your county government ASAP, June 2nd is the deadline for our primary here in California. So any last thoughts, Janelle, before we wrap this up?
I think experience matters. And I think, down ballot races are really, really important. And this particularly is a role that has been ignored or dismissed, or people just haven't done research on it. And so come to Janelle Kellman for LTG, FOR LTG on Instagram. We've got a ton of informational videos, a lot of fun videos explaining the role, explaining who I am and why you should care. And we should care because we're all feeling the ripple effects. No matter where you live, you are feeling the ripple effects of fires, of floods, of high oil and gas prices. And these are things that we as leaders need to address today. And we just haven't made enough progress. And it's time.
It is time. It is absolutely time. And with that, it's also time to wrap it up. So thank you so much for joining me. I really, really appreciate it. It's been a lot of fun. So Janelle Kellman, everyone, thank you.
You're amazing. Thank you.
Thank you.